Leadership is taking people on a journey where there's a vision, guidance and purpose.
Good leaders lead with the heart as well as the head.
Leadership means doing the right thing for the right reason, no matter how difficult it might be.
You're listening to Leadership Unwrapped, a podcast where you will hear from people who are living leadership every day. Welcome. Our guest this week is Dr. Niekie Blom, an academic whose area of expertise is design and technology education. You're really welcome. Originally from Pretoria in South Africa, you moved to Ireland for the first time in February 2020. And what timing that was. So you returned to South Africa in March 2020, just at the beginning of the pandemic. And you moved then back full-time to Ireland in September 2021. And as we know, you're still adjusting to the weather and maybe some of the accents too, except of course for the Kerry one, as we know. So you lead a programme of professional development and leadership for teachers, an international programme. And I'm delighted we're sitting together having a cup of tea and getting a chance to talk to you about your experiences and your thoughts about everything from leadership to teaching to whatever it is that we'll end up chatting about today. So thank you for taking the time to join us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So maybe we might start by asking you, why did you make the change to come to Ireland? What was the motivation to join us?
Well, I first came to Ireland in 2018 for a conference, and it was just an amazing experience. I met people in my field that work in Ireland, and it just gave me a new perspective on my subject, which is design technology, and it just opened my eyes to many possibilities. And I just thought, you know what, this is somewhere where I can learn, where I can develop. And subsequently, I fell in love with Ireland and fell in love with the people, and a bit of a cliche story, but that's the honest truth.
So we know you love Kerry, and we know that's close to your heart. So, but it's a big change from South Africa. If you were to describe maybe some of the changes that you find really different, what would you say they are?
Oh, there are many differences. I think, in the classroom situation, there's a lot more poverty. So you deal with students that come from very low socioeconomic backgrounds. So understanding where they come from, who they really are, and in some cases you need to dig for gold, because obviously when you get to know learners, they present, much of a bravado, coming from very diverse backgrounds. They need to show themselves, as a certain person. So you need to learn to look beyond that and to look, I always say, dig for gold, find that nuggets of gold in the person, what makes them tick. So there was a bit of that in South Africa. And I think, Irish, I haven't been in Irish schools that much, but I think there's similar attitudes. But one of the differences was the low socioeconomic backgrounds. Another one was the resources. So in South African classroom, majority, you live off a shoestring budget with resources, for example. Whereas where I see in Ireland, a lot of resources are provided for teachers and students to experiment with. And then in terms of background knowledge, there was also quite a difference in what children bring to the classroom. I think Irish education is fantastic, and unfortunately you then start seeing the discrepancies and the inequalities between what certain children around the world are getting for education. But that was some of the differences that I realized.
And as Patricia said there, you're now the course director of an international leadership course. And is this something that you had foreseen for yourself, or tell us a little bit about your journey there?
Well, not at all. But I recently read a book, and unfortunately I can't remember the name right now, but I really like the intro because this author was speaking about, looking at our current leadership around the world, We now know that we need better leaders. And, and I think that's the purpose of leadership education, is how can we cultivate good leaders? And, if we look around currently what's happening in Ukraine, Russia, conflicts and war, there's no doubt in my mind that we need to look at what works for leaders, what is effective leadership, and how can we develop good leaders? What do we need to develop good leaders, for example? So that's really a passion for me.
It's really interesting to see different leadership styles or approaches being played out in the global stage at the moment, and you're looking at two completely different leadership styles in action, and the devastation that this autocracy and that's happening, really, the damage that it's causing for everyone. It's really hard to watch. And then on the other side, you're seeing courage and bravery and just amazing responses to it. It's fascinating at the moment. It's a fascinating time to be alive.
Yes, and I think it goes so well back to my own discipline of design technology education, because we teach students to imagine, to foresee futures which do not yet exist. So, and for me, leadership and vision is, synonymous. You can't be a leader if you can't plan ahead. So the fact that, we look around the world, we see that things aren't the way that we want it to be or that it should be. One way is to develop students' imaginations, to be able to see futures that do not yet exist. That's optimal. But also you need the skills in order to lead that future. So that's where my journey starts.
Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, I think the international aspect of it is particularly interesting, and I imagine that the students that come to study it, or whether it's online or that they actually are able to come over, they bring such different experiences, such different backgrounds. And I'd imagine that would lead to very valuable learning and valuable conversations.
Oh my goodness, yes. I think especially in my teaching, I try to bring, my South African context to my classrooms, because we often find that people are, they go to their comfort, they live in bubbles.
Yeah.
And I'm involved in this project with a Centre for Children with Disabilities, the Light Centre in South Africa. And it's a non-profit organization. They don't get funding from the government. They plant onions, garlic to try stay afloat. Care workers at the centre get about €125 a month to care for children. That's been discarded by society. Some parents drop their kids off for the whole year and they never see them again. They don't want to see them. So I've met this amazing woman, Glennie Marubini. She's the director of the Light Centre, and she used to be a social worker, and she used to walk in South African townships and see how kids with disabilities are put in car chairs in a room, having sometimes only one meal a day. And she said that she needs to do something about it. So myself, coming from a design technology education, I bring in these social inequalities into my teaching. I use it as examples. So, for instance, take these scenarios to students and ask them the critical questions. So, first of all, on a broad global level, what is wrong here? How is this different from what they are used to? And then we can start with content in thinking about designing systems, devices for similar situations. And yes, I believe that it's an enriching experience for students, where they see that, they are not just designing devices that go to the dustbin or to a shelf in a room, but that their skills that they learn can actually help support anybody with a need that needs them. And I think, it's so important that we not only teach content, but we teach values, we teach care, we teach empathy for the world, because that's what the world needs.
Yeah, I think that's becoming so clear now. I think we've always known it, but it's more and more clear, I think, with every day that's passing. I had the privilege to listen to Glennie speak, and you invited me into a class, which I was delighted, and I thank you very much for. And one of the things that struck me was her generosity of spirit, her selflessness in what she was doing for children who really suffer. And the other thing that struck me was that it engendered an agency in the students who really wanted to do something to help. And sometimes it's just about making connection. Yeah. And that was what I could see that you were doing here when Glennie was speaking about her work and talking about the children that she works with, and our students were really connecting with their stories and wanting to help.
Yes, and I think, you know what, leadership isn't always in titles. Leadership is seeing opportunities and being brave, being courageous to do something about it. And I mean, this story that I'm telling now is, you know, it might be an outlier, but usually it's the outliers that teach us the core principles that we can draw from and learn from. I mean, the troubles that Glennie has encountered just by doing the work that she does. I mean, she's taken out mortgages to try and help these kids, but she wouldn't do anything else. So I think listening and interacting with people like Glennie can teach us a lot. Listening to stories and also bring that to classrooms, to international students, to see examples of leadership, because it inspires. Often people don't know how to act in certain ways, and just by looking at examples, we can either identify or say, you know what, I want to do something similar, or you know what, that's not for me. I don't operate like that.
Yeah, I think it's the exposure to the moment where you can see your potential, or as you say, to think more creatively or to vision what you can do is really important.
Yeah, I like what you said there, that it's not just in the titles. Like Patricia, you said about giving the children an opportunity to make a difference as well. And like that, it's empowerment coming from above, but that's leadership in itself as well. So I completely agree with you that it doesn't mean leadership is everything, but it means that it can be or that anyone can be a leader or can take up that role even without the title.
Definitely. I think if your capability to bring change about in life, and hopefully it's positive change, determines whether you lead or not, and whether you are able to dream or imagine futures and to be able to take action, agency, to realize that future reality.
If we could turn our attention maybe to your own story, if you're okay to talk a little bit about this. So we understand that you experienced COVID and that you had a tough run with it. So could you tell us a little bit about what happened for you?
Yes, definitely. So where to start? So 2020 in June, I think I was working remotely from South Africa and unfortunately tested positive for COVID. And, you know, a lot of my friends had COVID, so I thought, you know what, that's going to be period, 2 weeks being, you know, in bed, and then it will be over. And I think I tested positive on the 4th of June. The 9th of June, things went a bit south for not only myself, but also my parents. So I remember, well, I don't remember a lot about 2020. My memory was wiped a bit from COVID, but I remember hearing that both my parents have tested positive and that they were looking for hospital beds because at that stage, a lot of people had the Delta virus. So there was limited beds available in South Africa. But in any case, so I think on the 10th, I had to go to hospital because my oxygen saturation was very low and I was just sleeping. So, and I think one of the telltale signs was that I started coughing blood. Gosh. And then it was just, okay, I need help. And I can't remember too much about it, but from stories that I heard, I remember I was in hospital for about a day and then they sent me to ICU and I was put on a ventilator.
Okay.
So obviously very scary experience, because at that stage, you know, everybody told you if you go on a ventilator, you won't make it. You know, that was the stories going around.
Or the feel, at least. Yeah.
Yes. So, you know, it was a very scary moment that happened. But I think it was worse for people around me, because I can't remember much from that. So I just remember feeling an uncomfortable feeling in my nose and my throat, and then waking up. But that was only the beginning of a very, I don't have a word for it, but not exciting, but
difficult maybe?
Difficult, yes, difficult period.
Yeah.
So when I woke up from the coma, that was about, I think, 2 weeks that I was 2 or 3 weeks in a coma. My world changed. I was unable to speak for a while. I struggled to care for myself. It was the first time in my life when someone else had to feed me, bathe me, you know, basic dependencies that I had. And my mind didn't work very well. I remember the first few evenings, I suffered a lot from delirium, because you weren't able to sleep in the hospital. There was these loud noises the whole time that kept you awake, or sounds and lights. And so you developed delirium, which also caused hallucinations and stuff like that. One particular story that happened with me there that I will remember for the rest of my life. One evening, I was trying to sleep, couldn't speak much, but I think it was 3 o'clock in the morning. And I remember hearing a loud noise, and this loud noise was just keeping me awake. I couldn't sleep because of that. And I remember a nurse came to me and trying to utter to her, you know, what is that loud noise? And she just looked at me and she told me, I don't hear a loud noise. I cared for you, and now I'm caring for that patient. I'm serving, or I'm caring without fear or favor. Put me right in my place, because I was so, you know, focused on my own needs and my own need to sleep.
Okay.
And you know what, I thought, you know what, I'll take it on the chin. And couldn't sleep the rest of the morning. And as the day dawned, the light came into the ward, and I saw in her arms a 13-year-old child on a CPAP machine. They were forcing oxygen into his lungs. That was the machine that was causing that loud noise.
Oh my God.
And I just started weeping. I couldn't stop, because here I was thinking, I can't sleep while this child cannot breathe. And the only thing keeping him alive was that machine.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and that's one of the lessons in the hospital that I had to learn, is just, you know what, we are often so focused on our own needs. And granted, I might have required sleep, but once I saw that child battling for his life, and unfortunately he passed away the next day, it was just an eye-opener to always ask, you know, what is the bigger picture?
Yeah.
You know, what do I gain and someone else might lose?
It sounds pretty traumatizing. When you reflect back on it, do you feel about it in that way, or do you think about it differently? What do you think when you look back?
I still have mixed feelings about it, because it was a traumatic time, to be honest. But a lot of good things also happened in the process. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about other people. I remember when I woke up, obviously you feel very scared. You don't know what's going on. Are you going downhill? Are you going uphill? What's happening? Because you're not seeing doctors. Everybody's busy. There's no beds available. So, and the only people that you interact with are the nurses. And I remember thinking, and this might be part of the hallucination, so forgive me if it sounds crazy, but I remember seeing, you know, angels' faces on these nurses, because they would just smile at you. And I remember feeling so grateful for seeing people smile and these one-to-one interactions. And I mean, you often think that, what nurses are supposed to do their job. And yes, they are, but these nurses took time to smile, to check where are you in your process. And that caused me to think about my own relationships prior to going to hospital, about sometimes relationships can be so one-dimensional.
Yeah.
It's just give and take. It's just get the job done.
Yeah.
And
do you think that has changed for you now from this experience? Okay.
Definitely. I could ask for no better teacher, because I only had a dependency on other people. And for nurses that are busy, to take the time to smile and just say, you know what, don't stress, everything will be fine. It taught me a lot. And it's just basic, but it was inspiring to see.
So you were also in the difficult position of losing your parents to COVID. So
yes.
If that's okay to ask you a little bit about that.
Yes.
Could we speak about that too?
I will tell you about that. I first just want to backtrack a bit to when my mind was coming back to normal. It was a difficult period because I had to learn how to speak properly, how to balance, how to walk again. Although it didn't, I was very lucky that it didn't take a long period to get back to that. But I was dealing with all of these challenges. And I think while I was in hospital, people came to tell me that, you know what, you were lying in a hospital bed next to your mom. Your mom was just a bed away from you. But at that stage, with the brain fog, with the delirium, I really didn't catch on what was happening. Like, okay, my mom's in hospital, my dad is in another hospital. So I think people try to keep news away from me about, just for me to recover. And I think I was discharged from hospital on the 23rd of June, and the 25th of June they told me my father passed away. And it was a humongous shock because I've not spoken to my father since May. And not knowing what happened or what was the cause, and not being able to even greet or say goodbye, I was still not to my full capacity. And then, trying to make sense of your life at that stage, because at that stage I was still a lot in rehab. I still couldn't walk alone or be alone. So, that happened, and then it started sinking in. Then people started telling me about my mother. She was in ICU, and she was in the same hospital, just a bed away from me. Yes, so, and we were hopeful that she would survive, because she has a story of her own. She had a motorcycle accident in 2010, so she was blind, totally dependent on my dad. So when he passed away, everybody asked, "What's going to happen to your mom? Who's going to take care of her?" So we were all thinking, what's going to happen? But in any case, she actually showed lots of signs of improvement. So it was just a matter of time when she would come off the anesthetics or out of a coma, and then, we'll take it from there. And unfortunately, she developed septicemia some way, and that just U-turned her recovery, and next moment she passed away. And that was really a shock. That was unthinkable. It wasn't even in your mind that would happen, from going to both parents very healthy, very happy, to no parents. And then, you can't think right, and now you have to think about how to deal with death, how to mourn, how to and I remember being at their funeral and not knowing what was happening. It felt like you were in a room, there was glass around you, seeing stuff happening, but you can't really respond to that. And people come to you, they speak to you, but you can't even remember what they are saying to you. You just don't have the mental capacity to interact. And that time I was still trying to speak properly as well. So I think, everybody just looked with this kind of sympathy, and you just didn't understand what was happening.
That part of COVID we don't talk about a lot, that recovery piece and the challenge to recover, and just the energy it takes to come out of that brain fog and to be able to build your capacity to function again, which is a huge amount of work. And on top of that, a grief of losing your family.
Yes.
It's huge.
Yeah,
Absolutely huge.
you took the words out of my mouth there. Like I know you alluded to yourself at the start when you were saying it was nearly worse for the people around you at the beginning when you were sick, but it's just unthinkable of how challenging it was afterwards. I think people listening would automatically think that was the story almost, is when you were unwell, but everything that came after it with your own difficulties in your appearance is just unthinkable, and that it was really just the start, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. And I remember, so I took a while to recover until September that year, and then I came to Ireland again to start working, to teach, and everything was going well for the first 5 weeks. I was happy to be here. I was enjoying what I was doing. And then I think, on bus rides back home, I would start seeing my parents in the street, and just thinking, thinking nothing of it, just, thinking, it's the mind's way of playing that. And I remember one morning I woke up and I just had a dream of my mum hugging me again. And it was so tangible. And she took me by the shoulders and she looked me in the eyes and she said, "See you next week." And that broke me. That for a long while, I was very broken, and subsequently developed a bit, not a bit, but PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now I know that it was complex bereavement. It was delayed bereavement because I was so medicated during the first part when stuff actually happened.
Yeah.
And you know what? I never had to deal with death before my parents passed away, or hadn't had to deal with death of people close to me.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was a learning school in itself, because in your mind you want to be productive, you want to contribute to society, but for a while I just had to be.
Yeah.
That was all I could do.
Yeah. What is quite striking about you is your positive outlook on life, given everything that you're still contending with. This is still quite fresh.
Yes.
Your grief is recent, and it takes quite a bit of time to come to terms with that. So the changes for yourself in your own life, and I think long COVID, I think, is something that's probably going to be with you for quite some time, but also then grief and understanding that process, is complicated, even with losing one person, losing two together unexpectedly. So, and yet you're quite positive and kind as a person to know. I'm always quite struck by that. Why do you think that is?
Thanks, Patricia. I think a lot has happened. I remember when I just came out of the coma, I used to cry in the mornings because I was so grateful for every breath that I could take. It was colors outside the window of trees. I've never seen such magnificent green in my life after this experience. And I just knew that, I have a second chance at life.
Yeah.
And I must do everything that I can to make the most of that. It could have gone the other way. We've unfortunately had friends that passed away that was younger than I am.
Oh.
So, and I just knew that there's a reason, there's life is a gift. And during later in time, October, November, I started reading the work of Viktor Frankl.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Yeah. Man's Search for Meaning. And I mean, reading his story it just brought my own life into a bit of perspective.
Yeah.
Looking at, what I had a few months of difficult times. He had 4 concentration camps. He had, I can't remember how many years in those 4 concentration camps to deliberate about what makes some people survive and other people give up.
Yeah.
So it was drawing on other people's experiences that just gave me insight into my own mind, because I don't know where it comes from, where this drive to help other people, to see the positive, or to be in the mood for life, as I call it. I don't know yet where it comes from, but I do know that, like I said in the beginning, that the world needs better leaders, the world needs better visionaries, the world needs people that are positive, that are kind, that are empathetic. And that's part of my life's mission, is to develop people in leadership, in design technology, that would look beyond their own needs.
Yeah, like I think that's something that's deeply rooted. Like, such a huge experience would undoubtedly give you perspective, but I think that kindness and that awareness is running deeply through you. Like, when you're talking about those experiences, you don't dwell on the pain or the discomfort or anything like that. Like, what you focused on the most was the kindness of the nurses and the people that looked after you. Like, I think that kindness runs deep. You might have gotten a new perspective and a new lease of life, of course, with the second chance that you've been given. But like, I think that's something that's there long term.
Oh, well, I hope so. But yes, I think that, a lot of, I remember when I came out of hospital, I was not negative. Well, there was a period where I was negative, when I woke up and I was a bit regressive. But after that, people asked me the whole time, how am I? And I just remember I told everybody I have 100% peace, because a lot of good things happened beyond, the hospital bed. I remember relationships being restored with people around me. I remember, kindness. I remember all of these good things happening that, I hate it when people say there's a reason something has happened, because I don't believe that. Bad things that don't happen for a reason, but the way that we experience, or what we make of these bad situations, is what we take from it. And I'm actively engaged every day, trying to see the positive, to try and reframe, my own experiences. So, yeah.
One of the pieces around Viktor Frankl's work that resonates with me, and I just used the story that he talks about his wedding ring and being forced to give up the wedding ring and wanting to fight in that moment to hold on to the wedding ring, because it was the piece of his wife that he had left. And then it was almost like he had an epiphany, and the epiphany was, this is a symbol. Giving it over will not change my love, my feelings, my connection with my wife, or the life that I've had with her, or the life I'm going to have going forward if I survive. And when he handed over the ring, he liberated himself from, even within all of that devastation and abject inhumanity that was surrounding him, he found a way to liberate himself and to live and to be able to help others in that process. And there's something quite amazing and existential about that, I think. Yeah. And it also resonates with your description of your experience too. Yeah,
I agree. I think I had a wedding ring moment. I don't want to say similar, because I don't think experience can come similar to his experience. But my wedding ring was acceptance.
Yeah.
Acceptance of my situation. Always being independent, always, finding my own way around, and now being dependent. And I had to accept it. And I remember distinctly moments where I would rebel against situations, and it would cause great frustration that you would start crying, and then there was a moment of acceptance, and past that acceptance then you get peace, and then you can move on. But that, I don't know yet what gets people to a place of acceptance yet.
Yeah, if you do, could you write a book on that? Because I really need to read it. But and it is a journey, isn't it, to get to that acceptance? And
And I'm not there yet. It's every day. It's a process, and it sounds cliche again, but my process of accepting situations that I'm in is, I think once I cross that barrier, then I can move forward.
Yeah.
Authentically.
One of the things you said to me in relation to work, and how when we talk about leadership and work, and you said, you can choose to be cynical, or you can choose not to be. You can choose to see the potential and the growth in something. And I've been very struck by that, and I remember you saying to me at one point, since all of this has happened to me, I reflect on how I was, and I now see how I am. And I choose to be that it's more deliberate now. Is that fair to say, do you think? Am I capturing it?
Definitely, because I think, for me, my life has changed 180 completely. So I'm fortunate to have a view of myself prior to this whole experience, which in some cases I would like to grow from. So I have where I've been, and I now am developing that vision where I want to be. So comparing, my situation to where I was, and just telling myself I don't want to be there. I don't want to, be part of negative talk about students, about people. I choose not to be that person. And obviously work has potentials for being either positive or negative, and I don't want to be part of the negative development. So it's I think once you have that vision, once you know where you don't want to be, it's easier to make those decisions. And that's why I'm saying I was fortunate enough to experience what I have, to know that about myself, to know where I don't want to be and where I want to be.
Yeah. And I think just being deliberately kind, just choosing to be kind, and it is easier for us sometimes to just give out or to go into a negative place. We're almost wired to do that a bit.
Yeah.
But we just need to rewire. And certainly I think life teaches us that, even if we're not ready to learn it, the lessons come, and it's about being able to hear them, I think.
Yeah. I think it's something that, I think if I think back, in some cases it might have been difficult for me to choose because, like you say, you were on autopilot. So I think it's a conscious thing that sometimes you just feel in your gut that something is not right. And are you going to participate or not in that? Yes, but I think everybody has their own journey, and we can't force people to think in the same way that we do. I think it's up to everybody to have their, experiences, or in my case, a hospital experience to teach me about myself.
Yeah. So what are we going to see? Do you think, this might be a hard question, but where is Niekie going, or what are we going to see for Niekie in the future?
Oh my goodness.
I know it's a big one. It's a big one.
Yes.
Will we pause and take 5 minutes to let
Do you want to get a notebook out there, right? If you would drink tea.
Well, to get it coherent. That's the problem. No, I think in terms of my own subject area, I would love to, do research on design and empathy, and how to develop empathy skills, because we often think of empathy as just, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And often that translates to feeling sorry for someone else because of their situation. But when you actually start having empathy for people, you realize that you need information, you need knowledge about that person. So empathy for me is much about learning about another person's situation
Yeah.
rather than just feeling. It's both an emotional and an intellectual process.
Yeah.
So exploring those areas in design technology education is something that I'm really passionate about. In terms of leadership, I think, you know what, developing leaders that are not just good leaders, understanding their areas which they lead, but also doing that with kindness, doing that with grace, with understanding the personhood of someone or a group of people when you lead. I can't remember the author of this book, but he uses the example. He was someone in the military. He had a position in the military, and he said that a good leader in a military position that's a head of troops would actually in the evenings go back to look at the soldiers' feet to see, are their feet hurt? And knowing to say, you know what, you can't go out to battle tomorrow because you need to heal. And, instead of being so driven to achieve goals, we need to think about the people in that pursuit of the goals.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned the word grace and graciousness, which is a language in leadership we're not talking enough about at the moment. And it's exactly what you've described and a lot more. So I think bringing your thinking about empathy, your ethics, because we've worked together where you've contributed around that area, which has been amazing. And your thoughts around grace and personhood and leadership is definitely the direction that we should be going in. So I think I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in classrooms in general, how do we not only deal with staff, but deal with students? We are often so focused on, delivering content and improving learning achievement. But I don't believe that that's the purpose of school solely. We are speaking here about the whole child, the whole person. And, cognitive, intellectual activities are only part of that whole person. So I strongly believe that, a lot more needs to be done in order to develop those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the classroom, it's leadership, but it's life as well, isn't it? The traits of kindness, grace, that it's absolutely. Yeah, it's everything.
Exactly.
So will we pause it there and drink more tea? It's been an absolute privilege to talk to you. Thank you
Thanks
so much
much
for giving us your time and for telling your story.
Yeah,
it's quite a personal story, so thank you so much for sharing it. I think people will learn a lot from it, so I'm very grateful for that.
I hope it can shed some inspiration to
I've no doubt.
people.
Yeah. So a final message to those that are listening is, as we've said before, sometimes it's hard to be a leader and you can be doing great work. People will think, oh, well, I don't need to tell them. They know already. But leaders are people too. So if you have somebody who's done something really good for you or has been a good leader or made some good decisions or just done some good work, just take the time to tell them and say, thank you for that. Really appreciate that, because we need more grace and more kindness around us as we navigate our world today. Thank you very much.